Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Shelley, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for bringing me in.
Let's jump straight into it. Shelley,
All
what pulled you into the fantastic yet stressful world sometimes of consulting and workplace culture work?
Oh, I love that question. I'll try to keep it brief, but it was a series of events. I grew up in an entrepreneurial home way before it was called that. And my parents always said never work for anybody else. And of course, I didn't listen to them. You know, they were my parents. Fast forward, I ended up working for Marriott International for years in the hospitality industry for years on both the corporate side and the franchise side. And I woke up one day, kind of 2:00 in the morning, decided I didn't want to make the donuts anymore. It was never about the brick and the mortar. It was always about the people. So now that was 20 years ago, roughly. So I got on a phone call with a franchise broker. They interviewed me and they started talking about all these things around executive coaching, peer board review. And I laughed and I said, people make money at that? This was way before that if you had a coach, what's wrong with you, into what's wrong with you, you don't have a coach. So that switched. So I bought a franchise, took my bumps and bruises for about a year. I learned a lot, sold the franchise, and morphed it into what you have today. I was in a conversation actually with my business coach, and we were doing a VIP day, and she had done some great research on me. And early in the conversation, she's taking notes, and she says, "So you're a culture guru." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "You're a workplace culture guru." And that was the first time that actually had framed it in that way. And that was the birth of my hashtag Culture Matters. And realizing again, it was always about the people. It was never about the brick and the mortar. So I'm all about the people space. I'm all about workplace culture, how we do what we do when we work together. And there you have it.
What are your thoughts on the first, $100 million companies made by solopreneurs? I'm sure there's going to be AI is going to allow someone to build $1 billion company by themselves, or maybe like with a team of less than a handful.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Do you mean from a complete startup to begin with in the utilization of what they need? Just clarify your question again.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more with you, especially running and owning a service business. I know how much it is about people. There is lots of talk lately. Obviously, AI, blah, blah, blah. We've all had that chat already. But there is such a thing as being able to leverage AI, allowing you to need less people to build a bigger company faster.
Yes.
We're not fully there yet. I think software development, for instance, good software development that scales still needs people and so on. But we are headed towards the first solo $1 billion company at some point. I mean, this is going to happen in the next 10, 15 years, whatever.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? When I couldn't agree more with you in the fact that it's all about people.
Yeah.
In the current context, what does that mean?
Yes. All right. Great question. And so what immediately comes to mind, AI human, I'm thinking 6'7". So I had to throw that out there. So the AI component can help us with our systems and our processes and our integration, the automation, the speed of which. It cannot help us with the critical decisions that we need to make, the judgment that we need to make, the connection that we're still going to need to have. I do think that depending on what the industry is, some are going to be able to speed to scale, to your point, much quicker because there's not as much human to human needs, the service side of that, thinking through the mindset of it's not a customer, we're a consumer. And oh, by the way, I'm hearing that a lot more now that we're forgetting the service side and we moved into the consumer side. And that's why we're seeing that decline in all things, service. So I do think that some industries are going to get there quicker because they don't need as many humans to do all those technical pieces. On the other side of that, there is that balance. So I think some companies may be able to lean into 75%, 25%, and others might be 75% human, 25%. So just as a, an example to that. So my thoughts are we need both. My thoughts are that this is just on a much larger scale from accessibility and speed, but it's the same as when we move from mail to fax to scan, in-person to phone calls to video calls, to the emails and the texts and the Slack. It's just that it's so much has come at us in a really quick time. And I think COVID sped the whole thing up because we were thrown into how do we do work differently and better. And now that speed is just increasing on momentum. So that's my thoughts. My thoughts are we need both, but we need both intentionally. It's just like you can't scan everything. Well, you can't AI everything, I hope. The human element is always going to need to be there. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
It does. I mean, I don't know if it's fair. After all, we don't live in a fair world, but I think it makes sense to me. And I agree with you. I agree with you. So, I mean, the big question is when AGI takes over and nobody has to work anymore, what happens and how do we fulfill our lives and keep ourselves busy? Does global income, I don't know how to call it in English, become a thing? Many questions mark. We're not there yet. But yeah, I was just, when I talk to someone who is expert at making people work well together, it's always interesting to get their thoughts on the big topic of AI and how they see this integrating into our daily working life.
Hollywood's made movies about some of this stuff, right? Of what do we do when we end up sitting and what it does to our body, and forecasters are suggesting that, what do we do from how do we live, how do we survive, how do we provide? And there's going to have to be some sort of a framework that says, because I no longer do that work, there has to be some sort of a money share that sustains. So part of that revenue or profit comes back into society somehow to keep everything going. I don't know what that is, but there's something that's coming and it's going to have to come in order for us to survive, just survive, let alone thrive.
Amen to that. I mean, I don't know if amen is the right word, but let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Shelley, so bringing it back to you after that little tangent, what's the number one problem that you solve now for companies? Like, what do you help people achieve?
That's another great question. That has changed rapidly because of all things AI. So recently, I get a lot of phone calls, and I've actually written on LinkedIn about this recently too. I get a lot of phone calls to say, hey, can you help us do some skill assessments? One thing about my clients that I love is because of the service side, I think, I am viewed in many ways as a one-stop shop. So when the clients have something bubbling up that they're concerned about, that CEO, anybody in the C-suite, they're calling me and saying, hey, what are your thoughts? What can you do? So those phone calls have been around skills assessments, and it is driven by all things AI. Is what do we need to train, and I say educate our workers on today without causing fear that we're trying to replace them, but how do we scale them up in order to keep them here, not necessarily, to replace them. So I'm getting a lot of those phone calls. Before all things March 2020, everyone didn't, I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid like me with Culture Matters, and shift into post 2020 of March. And everybody now realizes, oh, that's not a nice to have. So I do get a lot of phone calls saying, hey, we know culture is important. We're 100% remote. We don't know what that means. Can you help us? Into a turnover in the C-suite, a board calls me and says, hey, we had to make a swift change. We know we've got problems and we need you to come in and do a full-blown shift and transformation. What does that mean? How do you do it? So I'm getting, both of those little things on the side, still include baseline around employee engagement. A lot of things that I do include behavioral assessments and emotional intelligence assessments. So I get a lot of those phone calls. And then all of those lead into internal creation of their academies, their universities, whatever you want to call it. And that allows for what I call the rehydration of a culture. So there's a lot of dehydration, hence my last book, Thirsty, where I talk about all of those things that are causing dehydration literally in the world of our connections and our community. So I get a lot of those phone calls to come in, and that requires a lot of different ways to droplets of water to rehydrate. So I know that was a lot, but those are some of the nuggets of the common things that I'm hearing and getting phone calls on now.
I love this because we start from the need, right? As in, how do they express the problem they have? What would you say is the thing that you help them accomplish? Like, hey, we need culture. We
Yeah.
need people working better together, although they are not in the same room 4 days out of 5 in the week, or even like never in the same room.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is it that helps them achieve as a result?
Usually people come in with the verbiage around, what's the return on the investment? And that leads to me saying, well, what are you measuring now? What is your dashboard? What's important to you? What do you think the drivers are? That leads to me backing up into what was causing that dehydration. Because before the signals turn red on your dashboard or yellow on your dashboard, they may have been green for a while. And then you wake up a few months later and they're not. They're starting to trend down. My role is to bring to them those dehydration moments before the green turns yellow and red. So I start with, tell me what you've got now. Let me meet you with what you're seeing now that's brought you to call me. And then let's back up and see what happens. So what I'm teaching is to see the dehydration moments while helping to restore them. So at first it's detecting it and meeting them where they are. What are your signals saying? Into how do I help you restore that and create something new? And then moving them into how do you tend that? How do you maintain that? Thinking, a gardener, because you can't just throw water on dry desert land and expect it not to roll off and to cause a flood, because it does. It's the droplet. So I first help them with a few temporary Band-Aids until I can really get the healing to understand what's happening. And then I lead them into the things they're not seeing without the dashboard, the moments in the meeting where nobody's talking and they used to talk, the moments if you're still coming to the office in the hallway and nobody's talking, the elevator rides that are silent, the security guards who's telling me, hey, it used to be different around here. So I teach people to see that. I see it automatically. That's my thing. That's my jam. That's my zone of genius. But I'm teaching leaders to see it. So before they get into the dehydrated, thirsty state, they're seeing the signals. And this is happening across and down into the organization. And that's what I bring to the table. My team brings to the table for organizations. And that's a little different way that most people think about it. It's the leading and the lagging indicators. If you're not looking, if you're only looking at what happens after, it's too late. You got to get ahead of it before. And that's when I'm really leaning in to teach people.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here a bit, Shelley.
Go for it.
Hope you won't mind. Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem that people are not speaking anymore in the elevator? What's the problem in the security guard not being able to have a relationship like they used to when people were passing by and saluting them with their name? Yeah. At the end of the day, I'm a company. I want to make as much money as possible.
100%.
What do I care?
100%. I'll back up first with something that I was told, again, by my parents young, is my dad always framed it from selling, that relationships matter. He didn't use those words, but, in hindsight, I was like, that's what he was telling me all along. Moving into my Marriott days, my formative years, I was told early on that they didn't use the word culture, but it was the employees first mentality. If we take care of our team will take care of us. You don't need to worry about anything else. And so I was told that over and over again, and I saw that over and over again. So the words, met. So formative years with Marriott, coupled with. So the disconnect, the root cause, I don't think it's one thing, it's many things. Definitely all things that led up to and then post March of 2020 made that happen. It broke the relationships really, really quick. It revealed a lot of cracks in the system, in the world, and how we communicate. We've gotten busy being busy. It's a capitalistic world. It is what it is. I'm all about capitalism too, so don't get me wrong. Obviously, I have a business in order to make money. But in order to get things done, we need other people. Even solo entrepreneurs need other people. And so if we can't find the way to have the conversation, to make the connections, to figure out the resources, to have the mentor, the mentee, the knowledge sharing, the good old boy network, the good old girl network, those are all conversational relations. But we have really gotten busy being busy, and we don't see what's right in front of us. Our schedules are slammed. We go from meeting to meeting. We're in survival mode in a lot of ways, and we just have stopped listening to the signs, the signals, what people are saying, what they're not saying. And to me, that's the root of it, is we've gotten so busy being busy. There's a TED Talk. I wish I could quote who the doctor was. She talked about the emergency room. Anybody watching, go look it up. But she talks about the busy being busy in the emergency room. And it makes me frame that from a priority and a time management, we've gotten into just needing and wanting everything now. I mean, everything. We have no patience. We want everything, in that everything has become an emergency. So what happened to the preventative care, those little conversations? What happened to, okay, occasionally we need to go to urgent care so we can nip it in the bud because we're seeing something, into, okay, this is really bad. Everybody's got to stop everything. We got to get together. It's an emergency. We moved everything into emergency, and we're fried, and we're anxious, and we're burnt out, and we're exhausted.
That does make a lot of sense. And that sounds fair. Shelley, who do you help specifically then? Like, who is your ideal clients when it comes to, the culture, the workspace, and the people? Who is it that you help?
Well, anybody who is in business and is working with others. So that answer is everybody. My sweet spot is typically 300 to 500 team members, often multiple locations, multiple levels. But my largest client is a health system with 14,000. I don't work with Marriott. I do have some pockets of franchise groups that I work with that are smaller, but in general, my average client is probably that 250 to probably 1,200. And then I've got some that are smaller and some that are bigger. Industry-wise, you name it. Banking, finance, property management, hospitality. I know I'm forget CPA firms, you name it, tech firms. It doesn't matter, because I'm in the workplace culture space. The most frequent people who call me are not the ones who really need the help, meaning the toxic ones. It's the board members and the C-suite, the leaders, the owners, who understand the importance of the culture, that if our environment and the very fabric of what we do isn't aligned, so here I mean mission, vision, values, if those are not aligned, our values are the crux of what we do when we work together. So if we're not, synergized around that and aligned, and so the ones that get, hey, I need to tweak it. Hey, I don't think we're aligned. Hey, I know this culture thing is important, but I don't even know what it means. It's not a nice to have, and I know that. Help me. Those are the people who call me the most. It's the level ups who get the value and understand that it can be better, and it can help them on their top line and their bottom line. Because listen, if they don't realize that's the end goal that they're asking me to help with, they're not coming to me because they don't think it's important and valued. So hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture too.
It absolutely does. It's interesting because I've talked with a few consultants, coaches who help with all things people management and culture. At the end of the day, I see how it can be industry agnostic. I think people like when it's like industry specific to them. That usually resonates better. But when it comes to people, at the end of the day, if you have to manage people, you have to manage people. I would say there are some certain personalities, right? Depending on, you mentioned banking, which would be potentially different from a startup full of tech people and engineers. Like the way you would address those individuals is maybe a bit different, but the mechanism of making them work together is, at the end of the day, probably similar. Yeah. The thing I'm asking myself, though, is helping a company manage culture and people when you have 250 people is radically different than what you need to put in place to do the same for 14,000 people.
Yes.
So how do you approach that differently?
Another great question. So you need to do it in pockets. You start with, my recommendation is to do it in pockets. Start with the person who's asking the question, asking for help, the curious individual first. You start there, and then you start to build it out, because a positive contagion. If you try to throw everything and everybody at the same thing at the same time, it usually doesn't stick. So I'm all about, let's stay focused. Let's go with, it's the 80-20 rule. Let's go into where the biggest pain is, and let's start to have a really good ripple to create the buy-in. Because if not, it becomes the flavor of the month and it falls flat, and we're like, oh my gosh, here's another thing. So I like to get small groups, and that can vary in size, but groups, a department, an area, a location, get the leadership involved, start creating those champions, those councils of culture to protect what right looks like, those guardrails. And then we start to have, the momentum, because yes, it's different. The other part is that one of my favorite tools that I use for all of my clients in some way, shape, or form every single day is Predictive Index. So I love having the science behind the human hardwiring. And I've used that for years, and that allows me to lean into the bulk that typically those industries attract, and what their hardwiring norms are about how they communicate, how they decision make, how they take action. And that starts to give me a pretty good view of how to lean in and to meet them where they are, and to kind of collect the masses. And that starts to plug and play the repair in a different way. So that early detection helps me understand who they are, which allows me to go in to restore and tend much quicker than if I wouldn't have had that information as well. Because yes, what banking attracts is different than what healthcare attracts, which is different when what tech attracts, which is different from construction, so on and so forth.
I like that. And I mean, thinking about how you build a business as well, right? You don't think about the mountain, you think about the first 300 meters and how you get there. And then you take the next 100 meters and how you build up to get there. And so tackling small teams by small teams and like making it compound and walk as you go. I like the approach. So a question that I yearn to ask you, Shelley, which is my jam, which is my domain.
This is going to be
How do you market all that? Because the way I like to see culture is what happens internally, and brand is what happens externally. So for you and for your business, how do you brand? How do you market? And how do you get the attention of the people who are the non-toxic ones and who see the need of like working on their culture? Mm-hmm. How do they find you?
Mm-hmm. Boy, if I had that secret sauce, I would already be the first gazillionaire, right? If I do anything and everything that comes to mind, to be honest. My most common thing is LinkedIn. It's videos, it's posts. I'm going to go to where people are reading and consuming the information. Marketing for me started with the research side. So again, understanding what is happening in real time. One of the big other different things besides the customization that I bring to the table is I'm really hands-on and I'm in the thick of it. So part of my ongoing absolute, I think, differentiation is staying very connected and listening. So I go to, SHRM meetings. So I'm all about staying connected with the people who were first deemed in that space, and that was human resources. Human resources should not own all of it. So let's be clear, everybody needs to own it. But I stay connected to what are their pain points. I have conversations with people like you to hear what are people asking. That difference between the branding, the marketing, and the selling. From a core branding and my logo, that's changed a couple of times with some feedback. But my go-to is being a published author, adding to that credibility, being able to do podcasts, being a constant on LinkedIn, from the newsletter to at least 3 times a week, putting out information, really listening to how people are responding. What are they saying? What are they following up? What are they private messaging me? And then from a, a selling perspective right now, because I'm 20 years in here, is I've got the trust, the credibility, the relationships. So I get a lot of word of mouth referrals, and, that's a beautiful thing. And then going deeper and wider with the clients that I have as well. But if I have the secret sauce of marketing, wow, to be able to land, to get into that business development. But I believe in putting yourself out there and getting uncomfortable and being asked questions that you may not be prepared to ask the answer, or, answer to. So it's not an elegant, well-spoken answer to your question, but it's all the things, but core in sort of that relevancy of trying to get people to hear my messaging.
I'm going to push back on what you just said, Shelley. I think it is a very elegant one because it's a true, authentic one. Nobody has it all figured out, but I think putting yourself out there is the very first thing to do. And at the end of the day, people in 2026 need to see the true you. At the end of the day, the service is not unique, but you are, like any B2B coach or consultant listening to us, right? So hence the importance of appearing authentic, putting content out there, and trying to get into the rooms where people make the decisions. Word of mouth is a byproduct of doing a good work. So in my opinion, if you are not getting that in the first place, we'll fix the product. But then it's talking about you, talking about the successes that you get. Quick question. Who is it that you try to get into a room with to make a decision to hire you? Like I suspect it's going to be decision makers, C-suite executives, but like who is it specifically in your case?
Yeah, typically it is somebody who has been referred to me or saw me, speak on stage in the human resources. That's a typical, so a CHRO into a CFO, and that's that lineage of, a lot of times HR is pipe into that. COOs call me a lot, and of course CEOs call me quite frequently, and then board members call me. So people who sit in an advisory call me as well. So it's often generated by somebody said something in a private conversation, and they were told, hey, you need to look this person up, or hey, let me connect you. And that's how it's happening. But decisions are typically either bubbled up in or for somebody in that executive level. And there, the C-suite can be the founder, the owner, into the depths. And then sometimes in the larger companies, like the 14,000, I was introduced eventually to, and I was brought in to work with the board. And then that opens up, so again, I came in small in a department. It happened to be the learning and development at that there. And then that led to, the bigger, broader piece for that. But yes, it has to be the decision maker. It's got to be the person that knows this is important. They know that they need an outside perspective. They need somebody who's been there, done that, and then that leads to them picking up the phone or me getting the email, introduction for that.
That does make sense. How do you move from that? So from the people calling you, from the phone call, from someone coming to you after speaking engagements, to, hey, yeah, looks like we're going to be able to help here, so let's get into a sales call or a workshop, whiteboard session, whatever it ends up being, SOW, letter of engagement. Can you walk us through how you go from, yeah, okay, we understand we have a problem, to, hey, this is the cost of not solving this problem? I mean, especially if you're talking to the board and the CFO, I think at the end of the day, they're also going to mind what's the impact on the bottom line. So how do you move from a conversation about something that feels important but is hard to sometimes justify to SOW, letter of engagement? Shelley, we rock and roll.
Typically, once I'm in a conversation, my normal questions start with is, how did you find me? What's going on there? That gives me context. Number one, I want to say thank you to anybody who connected, and to keep marketing and doing the things that brought them there. Number two is, why is this important now? What have you been doing in the past? And the big thing is, what's going to happen if this doesn't get resolved? And what does resolution look like? Those conversations, I ask a lot of questions. I'm a very curious human being. It drives my husband bonkers. You and your questions, but a lot of questions on the why, so I can really get to the thing. And you talked about this early in our conversation. Usually in a conversation, we think it's this, but it's really that. And we didn't know it was that until we were in the conversation with somebody who really was like, oh my gosh, that's it. Yes, help me there. What do we do? So that, then it's the pain points of what's going to get in your way and what's getting in your way now. Because a lot of times people are clear on this, we need to fix that. And I know that that is going to be the lever for, for this. And so when they know that, then I'm like, well gosh, you seem like you know what to do. You're spot on. I can't disagree with you. Why is this not happening then? And what happens is, and it goes back to something I said, we get busy being busy. The outside consultant has the luxury of being able to see things because we're not in the thick of it. We're not getting sucked in. It's one of my favorite lines from one of the Godfather movies where he talks about he's trying to get out. And he alludes to the fact of they keep sucking me in when I'm trying to get out. So it's not that the leaders, the owners, the board, the C-suite, the employees are not trying to lift their head up, but they're getting sucked in. So that's where I can come in and go, okay, as an outside person, I see this, this, and this, and we can do this in this timeline. Does that measure what you're looking for? And then again, I come back to what's it going to cost you if you don't get that? Because I'm all about cost benefit. If I can't have that alignment, then you don't need me. You don't see the value in it. And then we get into, well, how are we going to see that? Because you do have to bring the metrics in order to prove the ROI. And that's how the conversation happens. And then it all goes to paper. You asked this. You said you wanted that. We agreed on this timeline. Here's our benchmarks. Here's our milestones. I'm all about, hey, if there's at any point you don't think I'm delivering, above and beyond, by the way, what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it, we can come back and realign, or I can introduce you to other people. I'm happy to say, knock on wood in every way, I've never had that happen. But I believe in it, just that much. And then from there, I say, this is what I'm going to do, the team's going to do. And I say, this is what you and your teams are going to do, because we have to have alignment for that as well. Because if not, you get into, scope creep. Seen it happen to me when I first started. And so clarifying the triggers along the way. And then I also always give a list of add-ons. We can start here. Your budget is this. I get it. I respect it. Let's do this. Let's come back. Let's talk about what you got directly that you can measure on your metrics and all the organic things that happen when the light bulb comes on. You're like, oh, and then we can come back around and we can talk more. Most of my clients start off with a 3 to 5 year engagement. And of course, we have out clauses on both sides because things didn't get there overnight and it doesn't shift overnight. And it usually is like, okay, now we've done this. Now what are we ready for? And again, rinse, repeat. What are we going to measure? What's getting in the way? Time, money, resources.
I love that. I feel you've already answered my next question as well, which was, how do you retain? I like the approach a lot. Shelley, let me throw a little bit of a curveball at you. The same way the challenge for your husband is like how curious you are. What's your number one challenge with your business? What is it that, what's the nut that you're trying to crack right now that, if you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level? What would that be for you?
I do have, speaking of all things AI, I do have my own AI thing happening behind the scenes. My team is amazing and they're doing things that I could never conceive or figure out. And so in short, the nut I'm trying to crack is, my own legacy, if you will, the lineage to carry on. I've been doing this for years. How do I transfer my knowledge, my institutional knowledge, and to pass that on to other generations and to other people? I mean, I think ultimately we're each given a gift, and the worst thing we can do is to not pass that gift along. So my team's been helping me get the Shelley brain into something that's a little bit more systemized, because the good and the bad is I see things, but sometimes it's hard for me to articulate that and put it into an SOP and a process for somebody else to pick it up to be able to see what I see. And so here I'm talking about team members to be able to do what I do. So everybody doesn't need Shelley. I mean, love to be wanted, but eventually Shelley's not going to be here. So the nut I'm trying to crack is, how do I marry my knowledge into something that's really viable and adds huge value for my clients, that they can dial into me and to dial into my team in a different way. That it helps for the speed in a different way, the resources in a different way. What I don't want to do, and I've been asked this a lot, is do I want the digital version of me? And I'm not going that far. I know there are coaching out there that have the digital version. I'm not ready for that. I don't want that, because I do think that's still the differentiation. But to answer your question, the nut I'm trying to crack to be able to help more people quicker, better, faster, and to meet them where they are on their budgets, because budgets vary, is to be able to, what is that digital resource version, AI culture application that people can consume daily, because I'm not there daily. I can't be there daily. Nobody's going to bring me in, nor do I want to come work for someone else permanently. That's not my thing. So that, I hope I'm making sense. That's what I'm, trying to, get into. Other wishes for that is larger stages and speaking events for people to consume the Thirsty book. Inside of that book, it's 3 parts. It's the fable. It's kind of the higher ed textbooky. And then the third is the playbook. I've given it to you. Pick it up. If you want to implement it on your own, I'm all about it. Go. If you need help, you call me. But the nut I'm trying to crack is, how do I help people get ahead of, and how do I help people see what I see when I walk into a room, when we're talking about teams, the immediate vibe in the sense. And I just, that's where I'm at. That sounds weird. That sounds lofty, but that's what I'm trying to do, and not do it from an egotistical standpoint. But here's the thing. I don't want my kids to go through what I went through when I have worked for other people. I hear their pain. My kids range from 21 to 29. And I just think there's a better way. I think we can have work-life balance in our own ways, and to give value inside of how we make our living, as well as other buckets. And I want to be able to bring that to people on a larger scale, because I had somebody call me the other day, wants to kick off a coaching agreement. And one of her goals was, in 2026, I want to like 50% of my job. Right now, I only like 25%. When I read that, I said, oh, and I don't know how old she is. I think she's probably in her late 20s, early 30s, but that's heart-wrenching. It's not supposed to be that way. I took you down another path, but that's the core of my why and what brought me here and what I want to leave behind in a good way.
This is why I love this format, Shelley, is because we can take tangents whenever we want. And I think this was I was going to say beautiful one, an important one. And I was going to ask you, why don't you want to have a digital version of yourself? I think you provided the answer to this. That's obviously not the direction you want to take, especially since you embody what you help people with. I like it. It's so my mentor says, actually, if you knew what it would mean to become a business owner, you would never in the first place, because you start saying, okay, I'm going to quit my job and do the only one thing that I like. But actually running a business is doing what you like 10% of the time, and 90% of the time it's marketing, selling, training, hiring, onboarding, admin, finance. I was like, I just wanted to, do some awesome podcasts. Yeah. One quick question I want to ask you. I know we are way over time here, but I'm here to pick your brain after all. We recently came up with probably the best lead magnet we've ever come up with. It's a playbook where we break down the entire thing of what we do, so that we can say exactly as you mentioned. Hey, you want to do this yourself? Like, you don't want to risk whatever thousands of dollars? No problem. I believe so much in this that I'm giving this away to you for free. This is 3 years of knowledge, 107 B2B podcasts launched. I'm picking up on this because you mentioned something very similar with your book. In your experience and to the best of your knowledge, what's the way to get people not just to get the book, but to actually consume it and implement the things in them so that they can actually get results, even by themselves? How are you going to crack that nut, or how are you, cracking it right now?
And that is the crux of the problem. There are so many, books in every genre out there. I mean, thousands of leadership books, probably thousands of culture books now too. And, at the probably kind of saying the same thing, just their own spin, their own way to that. So how do you get at that? It starts with the people who want to do better, want to understand better. It starts there, right? And then it leads into somebody read the book and like, oh my gosh, you need to read this book. And then it leads into, and this is where I'm going with the answer, is that somebody says, for example, my last book, this is my 6th book. I keep saying I'm not going to write a book. I loathe writing. I love doing these conversations. I love the writing. Anyways, is that I want that book to be the playbook that people pick up, that they call and say, hey, and maybe they don't even realize it's me. They're like, hey, we want to do a retreat and we want you to frame the treat around this book we just read, Thirsty. I get those calls around 5 dysfunctions of a team. Hey, can you come in and do a team building around 5 dysfunctions of a team? What I want, that nut I want to crack is, hey, we want you to come in and do this around this book, Thirsty. Whether they know it's me or not, that's when I know, and that's when I think other people would know that their playbook has been picked up, because now people are going, hey, this has a frame. This has a frame. There's another culture book. It's a We, and I wish I had it. It's in my plethora of books someplace there, and it's got a lot of good nuggets. And I've recently had people say, hey, can you come in and do it? And can you frame it around these 10 principles of the we versus, me? Hey, the let them, let me. That's when you've cracked it, is when people are doing that. It's just, I don't have the answer of how to, if I did, I would already be doing it. I'd already be there.
Shelley Smith, ladies and gentlemen. Shelley, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, read Thirsty and apply the principle explained in it, where should they go?
Easiest thing is Shelley@premierrapport.com. So just, email me, go to my website. The books are on Amazon, and I'm absolutely all over LinkedIn. So by all means, look me up on LinkedIn. You'll see posts and downloads for that.
We'll put all the links in the description. I don't know if we are connected on LinkedIn, Shelley, but if we aren't, we are about to. So you get at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders. This was absolutely great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.